on the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Christa Shifflett from Warren County, Virginia, where she serves as Executive Director of the Warren Coalition. Over the past 4 years, she and her staff have been developing a layered, intricate approach to developing community resilience. The foundation of this work is the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. I met up with Christa at the 2023 CADCA Mid-Year following her presentation, Connection and Resilience versus ACEs and Isolation, the battle for healthy communities. Well, Christa, welcome to the Prevention Perk. Happy to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a great opportunity to sit down and talk about something that I try not to miss when I'm at a conference and the discussions around ACEs. I find it to be an interesting topic to explore. What I found to be interesting about your presentation was that you kind of brought it beyond just the individual experience. You're talking about exposing the entire community to resiliency around the ACEs. So before we get into that, what I'd really like to know is, how did you get into prevention? What was that path like for you?
So I had worked in business, and I was working about a 2-hour drive from home. I had young children. And one day I just sort of woke up and said, what difference does it make that I'm going to work? I was making good money, but I'm away from my children, and who cares? The person I'm making money for cares. No one else cares. So I decided that I was going to go back to school, and I became a teacher, and I did that for a while, became disillusioned with the education system, and had another job that I loved that was working with children with disabilities, but I could never get full time, so I was looking for something else. And as a kid, I had many friends who struggled, particularly with alcohol. Some had had fatal accidents, many had had other very negative consequences happen to them because of alcohol. And so when the opportunity arose for me to take a job as an executive director for a prevention coalition, I had lots of things to draw on just with my friends who had really struggled or suffered. And so that's kind of how I got there and how I went. And that was 23 years ago.
Well, it's been a good path for you then, it sounds like.
It has, definitely.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. SAMHSA's National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative, NCTSI, improves treatment and services for children, adolescents, and families who have experienced traumatic events. You'll find a link for this resource in the show notes or visit samhsa.gov/child-trauma. So I've already alluded to this. You talked somewhat about the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And for any of you that are listening that might have been at the conference for CADCA in Dallas recently, you might find her presentation, Connection and Resilience versus ACEs and Isolation, the battle for healthy communities. Let's talk a little bit about, first, if the audience is unfamiliar, what are ACEs?
So ACEs are Adverse Childhood Experiences. They were first coined that term in 1997. Dr. Rob Anda and Dr. Vincent Folletti had done a joint research project with about 17,000 people and discovered a lot of commonalities around things that happen to people in childhood. And these could be things like abuse and neglect, or it could be people in your household who are suffering from mental health issues, those sorts of ideas. And they were really surprised that even across higher socioeconomic groups, that these numbers were pretty consistent. And then they started noticing that they were also tied to particular health effects that people were experiencing. It could be behavioral health or it could be physical health, but those numbers, there was a huge correlation with them, and more studies have been done since then that have reaffirmed that if you've struggled with ACEs in childhood, you're more likely to have some of these issues. However, there is something that can help you, which is building resilience. So we can try to give you positive experiences in childhood. I couldn't prevent the death of your parent. There's nothing that I could do about that. But there are things that I could do to help support you and help lift you up so that you have good coping strategies and you don't turn to negative choices to try to ease your pain.
So you said, as an example, the loss of a parent. What are some other adverse childhood experiences that a person might encounter early in life?
Well, in their particular study, they looked at physical abuse, they looked at sexual abuse, they looked at neglect, they looked at someone struggling with substance misuse in their household, a mental health issue, maybe someone had tried to take their own life, those sorts of things that they would have encountered. And what they found about ACEs is if you have one ACE, there's a 67% chance that you will have another ACE, so that they build on each other and they tend to occur in clusters. So if you witness domestic violence, which would be one of the ACEs, then there would be a chance that you may well have suffered from physical abuse as a child as well. That would be the pairing that I'm trying to describe to you.
Now, isn't there kind of a threshold, if I remember correctly, there's like 10 ACEs that they would study. If you reach a certain number, you have a higher likelihood that, for instance, you might have a substance use issue in life. Is it 3 or 4 or something like that?
4 is the magic number, and then 6 is the magic number for actually loss of life, years of life. If you have 6 or more ACEs and you don't have the resilience on the other side, they see about 20 years lost off the time you'll live. Your body suffers from a lot of inflammation, and then your telomeres determine the length of your life. They're actually basically eaten away by the cause of the inflammation in your body, reducing how long you live. So we are, as our coalition, we're working really hard to try to reverse those things and build resilience, and in individuals, but also throughout the community. Because one of the assumptions, and I went through my training with Rob Anda, who was one of the original people in the studies, one of your assumptions is you should assume that a person that you're dealing with has ACEs. It's very common in the population, depending on what socioeconomic class you're coming from, or what racial group potentially. Could be up to 70% of the people have experienced ACEs. So assuming that someone has an ACE without having to inquire, you're not going to harm them, certainly, by trying to build more resilience. So we just assume that people have ACEs, and that's where we're operating from.
And it's probably more common than we realize when you say in some instances it might be up to 70% of a given population. It might be just as simple as people really don't understand how they might have been impacted early in life and not see that as something that is neglectful or abusive, i.e., for example, like, well, everybody seemed to be treated like that. I wouldn't have saw that as myself being any different. Is that where those numbers kind of stack up and people just aren't aware that they were in adverse environments?
I think sometimes, yes, that's true. I've certainly encountered people where I've said to them, that doesn't happen in other people's households. You don't see, your parent doesn't get a gun held to their head, or your sibling gets shot at or thrown out of a car. I mean, most people aren't experiencing that. And generally, because lots of times when that's happening, they're isolated, they break down. They will begin to cry as they try to reconcile that isn't how life is for everyone else. And then sort of, what did I do? What was wrong with me that caused that to happen? Because frequently you go to that inner child in you who then thinks there's something wrong with you. It's never the parent. That's just not how children operate. You need that parent for survival. So the child takes on the shame and the guilt around that, rather than the person who owns that, which is the adult.
It's something that I did, or it's my responsibility.
Exactly, yeah. And that's a very natural response. So trying to work people through that is also important, that it wasn't their fault, that there's nothing wrong with them, that they mattered, that they were an imperfectly perfect child, and they're okay. And we spend a lot of time with individuals working on those. But across the community, it's important that everybody knows that they're enough and that they matter, And we work really hard through our coalition to get that information out in many different ways through the community broadly, so they hear those messages. And the community actually thanks us for it. We've gotten thanks from people saying, thank you for saying we matter. And it's a great feeling, but it also makes you realize that they don't hear it, that many people grow up in their life and didn't hear those things.
I'm familiar with the 40 developmental assets, and you may be familiar with that work through Search Institute, and that's one of the things that they stress in their work is that a person has a higher likelihood of being resilient. I'm probably not saying that the right way. If they know at least one person in their life cares about them that's not their parent, like another trusted adult or something like that. So what I hear you saying is it's really pretty simple. It's just those things are absent in their life. They wouldn't even know that they're missing them. And then when the broader community kind of says, you're important, we care about you, we're glad you're here, it's like, well, that's never happened to me before,
Right.
you know? What impressed me about the presentation that you were doing, or that you did, was I guess in the stuff that I've been exposed to around ACEs, it's kind of been, I've just looked at it as kind of like a one-on-one or kind of more informational, but you really kind of brought it to life from the perspective of the community's embracing this. It's almost like you're not just healing an individual that might have 5 or 6 ACEs in their lives, but the whole community's kind of getting an exposure. I mean, this is universal prevention across the community. Can you talk a little bit about how this, for me, it's kind of an individualized experience, but yet the whole community is benefiting from it?
Right. So we decided, looking at the ACEs and the outcomes, that there had to be another way. And we created a program, an initiative that we call We See You, Warren County. And in the beginning, we went around literally door to door and asked businesses, would they sign on? And what we were asking them to sign up for was lifting up people in the community with specific themes. We have a different theme every month. Our theme this month is We're Stronger Together. And we want them to embrace that and share some of or try and complete some of the challenges we ask them to do with their customers coming in, within their families, maybe in their civic groups or their churches, and then spread that. Because individuals can join too, but we ask them to take that on, and they commit to doing that when they sign on. They'll have stickers in the window so you know who are We See You members. And families get those too. It's not just businesses. You can have them on your car, whatever, just to sort of say, we're practicing this. And then we give them tips. So they'll get an email from us that say, hey, this month we're trying to do this, and these are some things you can do around that, and give them suggestions. Because people might not know right off the bat, well, how do I embrace that? Or how can I make that be a point? So we give them written ideas, and then ask them to write about it so they can share how they're doing that in the community with other people. And reach out, and it's a very, very much a positive thing. So on our Facebook, it's about lifting up, lifting up, lifting up, lifting up, lifting up. We do not want the negative weaving in there. That is, no, not happening. We need to focus on the positive. And we are not genetically predisposed to focus on the positive. From a survival standpoint, our brains are trained to go to the negative, expect the worst,
like
to keep us alive. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is a practice thing. You have to teach people to move to the positive thoughts, and that look at positive intentions. And if you're looking at negative, I always say, well, what are you afraid of? If you're jumping to a negative intention, what is your fear? Instead of coming at it from a position of love and think, maybe this person is doing the best they can, instead of thinking badly about them, and how do we support them in moving along and being better? What do they need to be okay in that minute? And if everybody starts to take that attitude, then you see people lifting others up. And we mean it when we say, you matter. That could be the person who's sitting on your park bench with the brown bag early in the morning. Mm-hmm. You don't know their story. You don't know why they are there. So rather than assume, good morning, hey, how are you? Just to acknowledge they're alive. I've worked in a regional jail for 8 years now, and one of the biggest things I hear is we're invisible. People don't want to know, people don't want to see us, and it's just the hopelessness that comes with that. Because if you just felt like no one cared about you, why bother?
It's pretty compounded, I would think, just in that situation itself. They find themselves in that situation, and then to come out of it, and then the community, they can't find employment, they can't find anyone that they can reach out to. How isolating that must be.
Well, we do that coming out of the jail. So they have people, we understand that. You know, we try to help them get jobs and get their licenses and get back on their feet. And without judgment, they have so much to give, and the strength and courage of people in recovery who have struggled frequently for a very long time to be able to work through that and overcome that, it's very inspirational. And then once they've found their feet, the difference and changes they make in other people's lives who are having the same struggle, the hope that they bring because they finally found that hope, which maybe they never had their entire lives as a child. There was nothing good happening there. And now suddenly they found that. It's such a privilege. It's such a privilege to witness that. And I always feel honored if I go to people's AA ceremonies or NA ceremonies and they're getting their 1 year or their 5 year, whatever, to be included, because there's a lot of wisdom there.
So it's, tell me again, it's what county is it you're in?
I'm in Warren County in Virginia.
So Warren County, Virginia, so is that, and maybe it doesn't matter, is it a small community? And I'm leading into that, like what's the scope of it? How does the community embrace that? What's that experience been like for you to kind of pioneer this, and then for the community to, if they're coming on board or if they're already on board, what's that been like?
It's been really moving. And again, just the growth, what they report to us is coming out of that comfort zone. They might be really friendly with their friends, but don't acknowledge strangers, and then really making a genuine effort to speak to someone they don't know, even if it's just say, good morning, how are you? Moving through that and slowing down enough to do it. That's another one of the things they talk about, is we're all so busy going about our lives so fast that we just don't slow down to even notice somebody who's around, who's working hard. Maybe, you know, you're a teacher in the school and the custodian is busy cleaning, you know, dumping the trash or doing whatever they're doing, and you don't even stop to think, wow, you know, if this weren't for this person, my garbage would be falling all over the floor in my classroom, and, you know, the bathrooms would be in awful shape, and you just take it for granted versus stopping and saying, you know, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for, you know, keeping our building so clean and so it'll be healthy. And we did do a campaign like that. We created a giant sign that says love, and it has ribbons around it so you can put letters in it. And when we first used it, we had people write love notes to our community to talk about why they loved Warren County, and we shared those. But now we take it to different businesses, and people sign up and they'll say, oh, we want it, and then they do a letter writing campaign. So when the coalition took it on, the place that I work for, we wrote letters to the people who were staying in the thermal shelter, letters of encouragement and support. And then it would go to a different place, and maybe they'd write letters to the town police department, or they wrote them to the people who were in the senior center, or they wrote them to the daycares, or they wrote them to teachers, or whomever they did as we passed the love sign around. And the lovely part about that is frequently who are getting the letters will write back to the agency that's done it and send letters of affirmation and lift up to them, thanking them for their work. And
that's really cool.
It is so nice, and affirmation is so important. And I will tell you, for me personally, I have a pretty decent trauma history, and you know, going into therapy and really tuning into my own inner voice, really listening to the things that I said to myself. The things I said to myself, I wouldn't say to people I didn't like. And so that pause of, why are you just tearing yourself down? So we work on affirming people, affirming ourselves, and affirming those around us. We run ads that talk about, how do you do that for your children? How do you do that for yourself? What does that look like? And sometimes people, I will tell them that they need to say those things to themselves. They don't believe it. Like, well, you need to keep saying it until you do. And I'm going to keep telling you that until you do. It may take time. But we need to give ourselves that gift. Why are we so hard on ourselves? And how can we think that we're going to get support from others if we're that negative about ourselves? Anything they say to us, we're not going to believe. They're like, oh, you want something from me, or oh, you're looking for something, or what's your angle, whatever's going on, because you don't believe it about yourself. But some of that is, we also need to do personal self-reflection to go, why do I believe those things about myself?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, to me, as you're talking about this, I mean, you're teaching people not only to be building a community, but to be kind to themselves within building that community. Now, again, what is the size of Warren County?
About 41,000.
So, and the reason I'm just curious about that, because you never know who's listening, is, could they do this in a small town? I think that would be fairly manageable. 41,000 is not a big city, but it's not a small community either. And then you're talking about campaigns. Do you have access to radio, television? How are you spreading this message? Facebook's one way, or other social platforms. What are other ways that you're kind of promoting We Care?
Just what you're saying. So we see you. We do the social media on multiple channels and run multiple ads. We buy time on TV stations, local cable, and that kind of stuff. But we've bought ads on TBS. Like during March Madness, like the Final Four playoffs and stuff. Now they just show it in the local,
area.
metro area kind of thing, but a widespread audience, depending on who we're targeting, definitely do radio, newsprint, and we'll put it in them, local newspapers, we'll do the talk shows. We have local talk shows that people can tune into and watch, local radio casts, same thing. We do some of our own podcasting. So lots of different ways to try and get it out there. And we do events. We do community events until we about fall over. I know my staff would really love to go screaming into the night if they had 2 seconds and they thought they could escape, because we put those out and go to the schools. We take it on the road. We take resilience building activities to the schools. It's an all day. We're here and we're working with them from the time they're in kindergarten, if we're in elementary, up through the 5th grade. Obviously altering the message if they're a little younger to they're in 5th grade. Then we take it to the middle school, same thing. We take an obstacle course in and we talk about obstacles. What's an obstacle? How do we get around that? What's resilience? What does that look like? Well, let's go through this obstacle course. You're all going to run through, and then we're going to come back and let's talk about it. What was hard? What was easy? Do you have any advice how to get over that? Because this was hard for some people. Oh, well, I did this. Oh, I did that. Or try again, or whatever. And sometimes they coach each other through it as they go, and this is what we're looking for. How do you build those skills? How do you get that up? And then we'll do another activity, the same kind of thing that works on building resilience. We play resilience bingo, and we literally go through, it's an affirmation game, but we teach what's resilience to parents, what it is to kids. How do you help your child to get resilient? And things as simple as this. Parents don't realize this. Me telling you good job is not helpful. You have no idea what was good about it. So you don't know how to replicate that. I need to be specific. Mm-hmm. The way you kept trying, even though it was hard, was great. So then I'm looking for you to keep trying even though it's hard. And that's what I'm trying to reinforce. Good job is meaningless. And we all just say it so cavalierly, like, oh, I totally did a good job. I don't know what that means. So parents need to be taught that, to be really specific. What behaviors do you want from them? And then also, it can't be about you. So I really like the way you blah, blah, blah is not helpful. Because you're outwardly looking for praise from me instead of feeling good about it from the inside. So how did you feel when you finally finished that math test? Oh, I was really proud of myself. I bet you were. That was really hard. You should be proud of yourself, that kind of thing, versus from me telling you that. So teaching parents some of those things to build that resilience, to come back around. If your child says something negative about themselves, don't say that, because then you're making it so their feelings aren't acceptable. We need to come back around to, Why do you say that? What are those feelings about? Talk to me about that. And then trying to help support a change in the feeling versus shutting it down. Because parents don't like their kids to be uncomfortable or unhappy. And if they don't know how to fix it, sometimes the way to do that is just stop it.
Stop doing that, but what do I replace it with in order for it to be a positive reinforcement?
Right. Or they just want you to stop. You're crying and it's bothering them. They can't make it. They want you to stop instead of getting to what's the feeling about. So we teach those things, but in big groups. The parents love it. And we always feed people when we do it. But then we get we always evaluate. They all love it. They give the comments from the kids what they like best, the comments from the parents, other ideas we could do that might be the same kind of things. And one of the things, and I haven't done this, but one of the things they talk about is maybe doing like a kids movie and then picking one where people are doing things where they're struggling, and then how did they show resilience? How did they overcome what was going on? What did that look like? And talking through that as part of the movie, but as a family activity, so they could come and have popcorn and whatever. But looking for those teachable moments to then, in their homes, teach that. Hey, what's going on in that? Did you see? How are they being resilient? That. And inclusion. That not alone is so important, because isolation, only bad things happen in isolation.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, can have a tremendous impact on future violence, victimization, and perpetration, and lifelong health and opportunity. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has a website dedicated to helping you better understand. You'll find a link for this resource in the show notes, or visit cdc.gov/violence prevention/ACEs. So in thinking about doing work like this in a community, do you have a background in like therapy or as a counselor, or is this something that just anybody that has an interest in their community could learn about and really make it something beneficial for their community?
Yes. So I'm a teacher. I have a master's degree in education, so I do a lot of teaching around this, and I've got a lot of certifications that I've gotten through the years around that. So I'm an anger management instructor, anxiety, trauma, and trauma-informed. I'm a trauma-informed instructor and trauma supportive instructor to certify people so that they can not harm people who may have experienced ACEs even unknowingly, to assume what we were talking about before, that maybe the behavior is coming from a place of trauma, maybe PTSD, and not judge, well, there's something really wrong with this person. No, this person may have had many negative experiences in life, so we need to think about what happened to this person, how can we support them. So definitely you can get those certifications, and there's a group called the Community Resilience Initiative out of Walla Walla, Washington. A spectacular group of people have been doing this, one of the cutting edge first groups in the country to take this on and provide those certifications. So that would be a way that you could go online. And I think you can do them. I had to do them in person, but everything's changed since the pandemic. So I think you can do them online now and take the courses and get your certifications. So that would be something that would help. And if you've had a trauma background, it's helpful to you. Because even if you're just thinking, I could never go to a therapist, I really don't want to do that, the way their trauma-informed class is set up, it really is very self-reflective and sort of has you look on things that have happened in your life and maybe recognize some triggers that happen that maybe you've never even thought about before. That's when I teach the class, that's frequently the feedback I get is, I learn things about myself that I never realized, and it sends people on a journey to get more information, right? So knowledge is power, so however we can do that.
What's interesting is, and you just kind of alluded to that, that it could be beneficial for someone to explore something like this that would be healing in its own right for the individual. But what's always impressed me about the ACEs is they're very simple. It's not a complicated screening, if you will, or evaluation of a person's life. And so it seems like it also doesn't deserve a complicated answer. It's really about the things that you're illustrating. Being kind to yourself, trying to be intentional about how you interact with children in the community, giving them positive reinforcements and those kinds of things. That's not complicated stuff. It's really an easy way of seeing how a person might have been impacted in their life, and here's some very simple tools in order to address some of those traumas that they might. Now that doesn't mean that they might not need traditional therapies, but it just seems like it's very simple and anybody could be engaging in this.
Yes, and that's why we did We See You, because there are lots of things we can all do every day with just that little bit of intentionality, that little bit of slowing down. And I'll give you an example in the office, and I've started this a number of years ago, but I started writing emails to people and I pause and I would start them and it would say something like, good and lovely people. And then I would say whatever I had to say, or most excellent people. Well, it wasn't a requirement for people to do in the office, but once I started, it sort of caught on, and now other people write their emails like that, and they come out one after another, but it's a very uplifting thing. And people, like their family members who see our emails are like, we don't do that in our office. Our emails are hateful. They might not even have your name in them, and you're acknowledging that this person is wonderful when you start. Well, and I don't just do that to people in the office. I do that to everybody I write an email to. If I don't know you, it's going to start out. I wrote one today. I was trying to fix something with an airline ticket. It started out, wonderful person, blah, 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 blah. And so many people comment back to me. I'll take that. Wonderful person. Or sometimes they go, I don't know about that. I'm like, no, that's true. Stop that negative, what's happening here. But people comment on it all the time. It's 2 extra seconds to value someone else.
I heard a presenter say one time, if we all did this every day, what would the world be like? He said, everybody you come across, just say you're okay and you're beautiful. And he said, not only will they see that as a compliment, after a while, you'll start to see that you're okay and you're beautiful, you know? It's just a very simple practice. I'm curious, you've listed, and as I go back to edit this, I'll pull out the different resources that you've identified, the Resiliency Institute in Washington and things like that. Are there some other resources that you think the audience might be interested in knowing more about?
So we do book clubs as part of our coalition. And we've read a couple recently together, Vivek Murthy, who's currently the Surgeon General, and then Lost Connections by Johan Hari. And they're looking at how important it is that we have ongoing, in real life, connections with other people, and how damaging social isolation is to people. And literally, they've done studies that prove that if people think they're going to be alone all their life, they actually lose cognitive abilities. Their IQ drops. They can't solve complex problems. And if that's happening and you think that at 22, imagine what happens through your life. So their books are interesting. And then Dr. Jean Twenge is the foremost expert in the United States. She's a professor out of the University of San Diego. She's written numerous books, particularly on the effect of smartphones on people's mental health, really focusing on kids and the isolation and the loneliness and the major depression that's happened. And she's got several books that really, through her studies, chart out how people's feelings of loneliness and isolation have skyrocketed, and their interactions and things that, 40 years ago we took for granted, like getting our driver's license or maybe having a part-time job where you're in school or going on a date. Our kids now aren't doing those things. The world has really changed. And if you're still looking at the world through that lens, that's not the reality for our young people. And what does the isolation mean with that? And so many more kids being treated for major depressive disorder, vast numbers. I was just in a session today where they were saying they've been doing scans of teens' brains that they had before and after the pandemic, and they've literally seen physical changes in the kids' brains. So what does that mean? Well, we've never been in this place before, but we need to figure that out. So, the more information you have, the more you can be helpful, not only to yourself, but to lifting people up around you. And, we all have a responsibility. Community means people. It doesn't mean one. So we all have a responsibility to try to create a healthy community. And these simple things, this pause and just give 10 minutes a day, you will start to see a shift in your community. And you will start to see that people are happier and coming together more. Sometimes I think people really want to do that. They just don't know how. So if you can start moving in that direction, and we would love to share, I came here to share this, so we want more people to do this across the country, I think we'll start to see a move towards better health. But it's not going to happen overnight, and that's the other part that I need to say. People get so frustrated. It's sort of like losing weight. I didn't get these extra 20 pounds on in a year, and I'm not going to get them off because I want them to go away. We have to continue to work at this. And I think sometimes we give up instead of going, well, we've made this progress, we've made this progress, we made this progress. It's taking too long, we still have these problems. And you're in it for the long haul, folks. This is a long game. That would be sort of my sage thing is, you need to know that you are making a difference, but it's going to be slow, and that's okay. Celebrate those wins and those victories and keep pushing forward, because if we don't, the outcomes are just going to be more and more negative.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed your presentation. I've enjoyed having the conversation with you for the podcast, and I'll put all the contact information for your coalition and how they might connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing. Thank you so much.
That'd be great. Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under Your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.